Prise le débat dans la secrétaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, to the Minister of Canadian Heritage and Tourism.
Today to speak in support of Bill C-45, legislation that will legalize, regulate, and restrict access to cannabis. The objective of our government's bill is to protect our youth, to deter criminal activity, and to promote public health and safety. Let me turn first to the issue of Canada's youth. Canadian youth use cannabis more than youth anywhere else in the entire world, Mr. Speaker. In 2015, use among youth aged 15 to 19 was 21%. In many cases, accessing cannabis in this country is easier than getting a cigarette or buying a bottle of beer. So clearly the current system is not working. Confronted with this reality, our government has two options: continue the zero-tolerance policies that have been proven to fail, or adopt a policy of harm reduction. We have chosen the latter. We've chosen to recognize that people, including young people, are using cannabis, and the best way in which to address the situation is by accepting this fact and taking positive, proactive steps to educate youth about the dangers of cannabis use, while simultaneously penalizing those who would seek to encourage cannabis use among youth. For example, we know, Mr. Speaker, that cannabis has the potential to cause short and long-term mental health and physical health effects, and that it poses greater overall health risks in developing brains. Because of this, our government will provide funding towards public awareness campaigns, which will inform our youth about the risks of cannabis. We also propose to get tough on those who target youth, Mr. Speaker. Similar to the restrictions on the promotion of tobacco products, under Bill C-45, there will be comprehensive restrictions applied to advertising and promoting cannabis and its related products by any means, including sponsorships and branding which can be deemed appealing to children. And there will be prohibitions on self-service displays or vending machines. False, misleading, or deceptive testimonials or endorsements that could entice young people to use cannabis will also be prohibited. A violation of these prohibitions would mean a fine of up to $5 million or up to 3 years in jail. We are also aggressively penalizing those who would target youth for cannabis sales. Our government has introduced 2 new criminal offences and an up to 14-year prison sentence for those who would give or sell cannabis to our youth or use youth to distribute cannabis. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to my second point in relation to the criminal justice system. Our government also accepts another clear reality: that the current policies of zero tolerance have failed to deter criminal activity. In fact, to the contrary, zero tolerance has actually permitted the illicit market to flourish, padding the pockets of organized crime and street gangs. In Canada alone, the illegal trade of marijuana reaps an estimated $7 billion in profits annually for organized crime. Again, as a government, we have a choice: to continue failed policies or to choose the route of legalization and regulation, a route that will take money out of the hands of criminals and thereby keep Canadians safer. At present, Canada is an exporter of cannabis for global markets, and organized criminal groups have reaped large profits from the cannabis cultivation and trafficking. These are individuals who operate complex, organized criminal enterprises who engage in violence and pose a constant threat to public safety and to the well-being of all Canadians. By taking money out of the hands of such groups, Mr. Speaker, we will be deterring crime in this country. The approach of Bill C-45 also has another important impact on criminal justice in Canada. That is reducing backlogs. This is a situation, Mr. Speaker, with which I'm very familiar. As an individual who spent 15 years as a lawyer in practice prior to being elected, Mr. Speaker, the majority of that time being with the Ministry of the Attorney General of Ontario. As Crown Counsel, I saw repeatedly the limited resources that are available to prosecutors, to police, and to the judiciary to administer criminal justice, which was exacerbated by the number of charges clogging up the system. In 2015, Mr. Speaker, cannabis simple possession offences accounted for more than half of all police-reported drug charges, some 49,577 charges out of a total of 96,423 charges being laid. By removing charges for simple possession of small amounts of cannabis, this bill will permit limited court and Crown resources to be applied directly to more serious drug-related crimes and to more serious criminals, the actual persons who pose a direct threat to the safety and well-being of Canadians. It will allow law enforcement officials to concentrate their efforts on significant criminal activity thereby improving their ability to keep Canadian communities safe. Madam Speaker, we have addressed how public safety will be strengthened through the new regime ushered in under Bill C-45. So now allow me to turn to my third point. Bill C-45 will promote public health. Public health professionals are among the various groups and individuals who were consulted in the development of this legislation.
First of all, there was the task force on cannabis legalization and regulation. It heard from professionals, advocates, frontline workers, policymakers, government officials, and informed community of experts, patients, citizens, and employers, all of whom were motivated to build a strong cannabis strategy that would benefit all Canadians. The task force hosted a series of roundtable discussions in cities across the country in order to engage with experts from a wide spectrum of disciplines, researchers and academics, patients and their advocates, cannabis consumers, chiefs of police and fire departments, and other municipal and local government officials, as well as numerous industry, professional, health, and other associations.
Election that we would make policy decisions based on science, facts, and evidence. Madam Speaker, Bill C-45 does just that by incorporating the recommendations of this important task force. Among the recommendations was recognizing that cannabis use is occurring in my riding of Parkdale High Park and around the country, Madam Speaker, and permitting adults to make informed choices about using small amounts of cannabis recreationally without fear of criminal sanction. The task force also highlighted, Madam Speaker, as a guiding principle, the notion that the law should demonstrate compassion for vulnerable members of society and patients in need of medical cannabis. But it recognized that from a health perspective, one of the biggest dangers remaining for cannabis users is not knowing the content or the quality of the cannabis being taken. It is precisely this unknown, Madam Speaker, driven by the presence of the illegal market, that makes cannabis use currently so dangerous. Bill C-45 will address this public health risk head-on. It will protect and promote public health by strictly regulating cannabis production, distribution, and sale. Rules will be implemented for adults to access quality-controlled cannabis while creating a new, tightly regulated supply chain ensuring product safety for Canadians, so that Canadians who choose to use cannabis are able to do so knowing that they are not endangering themselves. Once again, putting harm reduction as an operating principle to work, Madam Speaker. The global shift towards harm reduction for cannabis use has led to legalization in Uruguay, along with several European and Latin American countries that have decriminalized the personal possession of cannabis, followed by some American states representing more than 20% of the total U.S. population, which have voted to legalize and regulate cannabis for non-medical purposes. Madam Speaker, important lessons will undoubtedly arise from Canada's experience in the coming years, ones that will be valuable for advancing the global dialogue on innovative strategies for drug control. I'm confident that Canada will remain a committed international partner by monitoring and evaluating our evolving cannabis policy and sharing these important lessons with national and international stakeholders. Overall, Madam Speaker, I'm very confident that the framework proposed in this bill, Bill C-45, is the best approach going forward for Canadians. It recognizes the failure of zero tolerance and the merits of pursuing harm reduction as the guiding principle to inform public policy. It strikes a balanced approach designed to protect Canadians, especially our youth, by providing regulated access to legal cannabis for adults while restricting access by youth. It will put in place strict safeguards to protect youth from being encouraged to use cannabis and will create new offensive for those adults who either provide cannabis to youth or to those who use youth to commit cannabis-related offences. It will also help focus limited police and Crown resources where they are most needed, in prosecuting serious drug criminals, Madam Speaker, who make our communities less safe. Bill C-45 will promote public health through increased education and awareness, and by ensuring a safe supply of cannabis for those who choose to use small amounts recreationally. I would encourage all members of this House to support Bill C-45. We must all act now to make our communities safer by legalizing, restricting, and strictly regulating cannabis to keep it out of the hands of Canadian youth and to keep the profits out of the hands of organized criminals. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.